10 weeks into the NFL season. Do we have any clarity? Do we Eckers like? Let's get into it. The full 10 yards NFL podcast.
Hello, everyone. Cecil Martin here.
Hey, this is Hunter Henry.
What's up, man? This is Max Crosby, part of Raider Nation.
Hey, this is Ross Tucker, former NFL offensive lineman.
Hey, it's Tyler Lockett of the Seattle Seahawks.
Hey, this is Jerry Judy, wide receiver for the Denver Broncos, and you're listening to the 14-Yard NFL Podcast.
I think I said last week, fellas, if you like 9 weeks into the NFL season and going 500 in pick'ems, it's a fairly obvious state of affairs that things aren't quite as they seem week to week in the NFL. I think if anyone went 500 in pick'ems this week, they're probably celebrating because it's another bonkers week. Let's get into it. Let's bring the boys in. Steve, how you doing, buddy?
Somehow it's week 10, and usually as the games go on, you start to get more of an idea of what's happening in the NFL and how the playoff picture is going to play out. And somehow it's going the opposite way. As the weeks go on, I get the idea of how it's going to play out. So I really don't have a clue what's happening. I don't know what the situation is in the NFL, and I would like someone to explain it for me, please.
Well, hopefully, between me and Josh and yourself, maybe we might make a bit of sense of it by the end of the evening. But I doubt it. But we'll try. Josh, welcome in, mate. You up for the challenge of trying to make sense of this lot?
Well, put it this way. You say that anyone that went 500 this week in Pick'em should be celebrating. I am one of those lucky few. I went 7-7. So, I'm sitting pretty. And I think I can make just about enough sense of this. I did, however, spend my entire lunch break on my power ranking today. That's how difficult it is to actually make any sense of where these teams should be. If you're between 8th and 24th, you could go anywhere. Honestly, it's now just officially ridiculous. I hate the fact that I volunteered for this. In fact, I enthusiastically volunteered for it, and it has been nothing but hell this year.
You've done a stellar job, my friend. You've done a stellar job. They'll be up on the website as usual shortly, but let's break it all down first and foremost, fellas. Let's start talking about some of the games that we did see on Sunday. We were kind of optimistic for a bit of an offensive shootout between the Packers and the Seahawks, with the two superstar quarterbacks returning to the field. Didn't necessarily work out that way, though. Steve ends up as a 17-0 victory for the Packers, so obviously quite dominant on the scoreboard. But to be honest, it just really confirms, I suppose, where the balance of power is in that NFC at the minute. The Seahawks really look in a shadow of them for themselves. The Packers probably the strongest team in that conference on current form.
Yeah, I think so. I think when I looked at the score at start of the third quarter and it was 3-0 to Green Bay, that sort of gives you all you need to know about what this game was. And I think it was a bit of a battle in terms of the defenses. And Green Bay are starting to establish themselves again after all the off-field stuff, with Rodgers as, probably the best team in the NFC right now. There's a couple of others at the top that are starting to falter a little bit. A lot of others lost this week, so it was a really good week for Green Bay in terms of rankings. And they just look really confident right now. That defense is moving. That defense is really putting on a show at the moment, and I think they're probably the number one unit in the league at the moment. I don't really know who else challenges them right now. They're playing really good football. And they're just winning football games. Like, they might not be doing it pretty. They might not be blowing out teams like like the Bills have done occasionally, and like the Cardinals have put up big points. They're just getting wins. They're just efficient in what they do. The Seahawks, on the other hand, like you said, absolute shadow of themselves at the moment. I don't really know where their season goes from here. You'd expect. I know it's his first game back from a throwing hand injury, but you'd expect Russ to be a bit better than what he was. 20 for 40 is line read, 161 passing yards. That's unlike Russell Wilson. No touchdowns, 2 interceptions. Just didn't look himself. And I know DK Metcalf was ejected. I know, although he tried to come back in the game, which was hilarious. He was ejected, so obviously losing a target like that is big. But yeah, not putting up a single point. And a friend of mine's a Seattle fan, and asked him for sort of his take. And apparently that's Wilson's first ever shutout at home, which is big. Obviously, you'd expect Russell Wilson to score points every week. He said that perhaps Russ can't cook, and something's got to give at the end of the season. And he said, actually, strangely, that maybe this might be time for Pete Carroll. And I think we'll come on to it later on, but I think Pete Carroll will certainly be a candidate in the hot seat. A lot of people put this early season slump down to a tough schedule and losing a couple of close games. But now, actually, the Seattle Seahawks, are they just a bad team this year? Are they just a bad team?
I think it's certainly an accusation you can throw at them. Josh, let's get your take on it. I think in terms of, this game, AJ Dillon seems to be an emerging talent and weapon in this Green Bay offense. He seems to have taken on a much, much bigger role. Obviously, as expected with Rodgers back, Devontae Adams sees an uptick in targets and receptions and all the rest of it. But particularly on that defensive side of the ball, as Steve said, this is a team that really have gone to town in recent weeks. It's a unit that doesn't necessarily have a standout superstar, in terms of a name that would be instantly recognisable to the casual fan. But collectively as a unit, I mean, this has been a string of impressive performances, hasn't it? And just get your take on where both of these teams are.
Well, Aaron Rodgers and Devontae Adams would probably disagree with you on the whole star name thing, but yeah, I think
defensively, my friend.
Defensively. I forgot that major word. I do apologise, Sean. Please accept my apologies. It's been a long day, mate. It's been a long day. Yeah, I mean, defensively, they definitely did their job. I think that Seattle's offense is a little too one-sided, and we'll come on to other games of which have seen one-sided game plans and then being picked apart. I just don't think that Russell Wilson should have even started this week. I know he was cleared by the doctors, but if you look at the weather and all the other ailments of which were, going against a quarterback whose hand has just recovered from having a pin in it and all the rest of it, it just screamed, "Don't do it," really. And the scoreline really flattered them. The fact that it was 3-0 until the fourth quarter was more on the side of both the weather in terms of stopping Crosby from actually hitting a field goal, and also just dumb luck. Green Bay ended up with 400 total yards, just shy of 400 total yards, 287 in the air and 106 on the ground. That's a standard day out for Green Bay. Points aside, this was just a complete performance by Green Bay. Seattle, are they now just an average team? I personally think they are. Russell Wilson is one of the greatest quarterbacks in the league. DK Metcalf is probably one of the greatest wide receivers in the league, but their defense is terrible. They don't have a running game. And to be honest with you, I fully expected Green Bay to go out there and do this. It was not anywhere near as close on paper as some people said. So, yeah, Green Bay's defense did really well, but by the same token, I just don't think it was ever going to be Seattle's day.
I think I'd just quickly tack on there as well to add to the Green Bay's defense conversation. They are currently third in the league for average yards allowed in a game of 309.9. And they're doing all of that without Jaire Alexander and Zadarius Smith, who are two of their linchpins on that defense. So the fact that they're doing all of that without those two players is astonishing. They've got some players that are really stepping up. Is Eric Stokes, the rookie cornerback they've got? I saw some of the sort of coverage that he was providing, and he's just such a good player. They've picked up a real good talent there. I know we all complain that they never give Aaron Rodgers any help, but maybe this is giving Aaron Rodgers help, because if the defense isn't allowing any points, then he doesn't have to score as many himself. So this Green Bay Packers team rolls on, and I think there are changes looming in Seattle regardless of how this season ends. I would be shocked if it is both Pete Carroll and Russell Wilson back next season. I think one of them goes.
Speaking of, I just want to pick up. Sorry, Sean, I realise I've stopped you just as you were about to get your thoughts off. I just wanted to come to a couple of points that's being made on the live chat at the moment, just because I feel like they should be addressed whilst we're talking about them. So, Adam Murphy here. Surely with this roster, the blame has to be laid at Carroll's door. You can't blame the GM. The roster is loaded. Apart from Jamal Adams, where really on defense do you really see any big names? I can't think of any off the top of my head. And
I
then
think
when you
apart
look at
from
the
maybe
offense,
Bobby Wagner, that's probably about right.
Bobby
Isn't it?
Wagner, yeah.
Yeah.
But two men cannot a defense make. And then also, if you look at the offensive side, you got the wide receivers, but you haven't got a running game.
We've talked about this before, haven't we? Like, when Russ, DK Metcalf, and Tyler Lockett are all playing well, Seattle plays well, and they generally rely on those three to spark them into life. But if you take one of those out of it, if one of them's not playing too well, or if one of them doesn't have a great, game, then this Seattle team falls apart. And at the moment, I think they're just a bit too one-dimensional. I don't know what the answer is, and I think that we are heading toward an exit of one of these. Russ's status in Seattle has been up for grabs for a while. There's been talk of people wanting to trade for him, and I think there's certainly teams around the league that would snap Seattle's hand off for him as well. If Deshaun Watson can go for 3 first, then what can Russell Wilson go for? He's won a Super Bowl. So I think and Lord knows Seattle could use the draft capital to be able to start replenishing that roster and sort of move on. So yeah, I think this is going to be a down year for Seattle. I know I predicted them to reach the playoffs last week, but all of a sudden,
throw all that out. Throw all that out. That's already gone.
I know. Yeah, long season ahead for Seattle, I think.
Yeah, I'm sure we'll all be changing our playoff predictions throughout the course of the next 60 minutes or so, fellas, after this weekend. Let's move on then to another one of the teams in that division, and it was Monday Night Football. Well, 2 teams in the Seahawks division, obviously, because it was a divisional game between the 49ers and the Rams. Most people probably thought the Rams would win this one. I certainly thought the Rams would win this one. But, Steve, I know you've got a little stat to share with us in terms of it maybe not being necessarily as much of a surprise as we first thought.
Yeah, believe it or not, the San Francisco 49ers are now beating the Rams 5 straight occasions. So that's quite an impressive record, especially for a San Francisco team that have won, that are coming into this game had won 1 of their last 12 at home, which must have been last season against the Rams. So yeah, I mean that's a great start for San Francisco, and I just don't know where this performance came from. San Francisco for this season have just been so like hot and cold, and I just didn't really expect this, and I wonder if this is more about LA being sort of subpar than it was San Francisco being excellent. But I will certainly give credit where credit's due. Their defense looked pretty tight, looked pretty good. It was Jimmy Ward who had 2 interceptions. He was excellent, absolutely superb. And also Deebo Samuel on the offense, he had himself a day.
Yes,
he continues to make his claim for the comeback player of the year. So he had himself a day. And Jimmy G was just efficient. He didn't throw the ball all that much. 15 of 19, 182 yards, 2 touchdowns. Just efficient. You just got the job done, and that's probably what you want in a Shanahan offense. And just, I'm sure I'll let Josh come in first because I do want to discuss the Rams, but there's a lot of interesting stats around the Rams at the moment that are probably going underappreciated. But I'm sure we'll come on to them in a second.
Yeah, so I think that this played out very similarly to the Titans game last week, where the Rams will just have a blip on offense and the other team takes advantage. So the first 3 drives of the game, gents, interception, touchdown, interception, pick 6. 14-0 straight up, and you're in disarray right from the start. And the 49ers, like you say, Steve, they were just efficient. They just kept on moving the chains, not doing anything flashy. None of their rushers got over 100 yards. They mixed in different people and just kept on moving the chains. It's all they had to do, and they did it well. And the defense stood up when it had to. I think that LA tried to get a bit too flashy on offense, especially early. Not going to say anything just yet, but when you see the first interception, you just sort of nod your head and go, yep, kind of expected that as soon as you launch that down the field. They kind of got away from themselves. Cooper Kupp started the game. I think that when Matthew Stafford went back to Cooper Kupp and to his more trusted receivers, things started to gel back into place, but the damage was done. Realistically, they were always playing catch up, and it just ended up being too much in the end for them.
Yeah, I mean, a quick bit of praise for Cooper Kupp. He's having himself an incredible season. He's the first player since Calvin Johnson to have 10 receiving touchdowns in the first 8 games of a season. So he's having a hell of a season himself. But I think with the Rams, I think one of the big things that I've noticed, and you certainly see from their schedule and who they've played so far. Yeah, I don't know who they've beaten that you could say, wow, that was a statement victory. Like I put a stat in our group earlier to refer back to. So when it comes to it, when you look at the Rams' record, their record against winning teams, well, teams with a winning record this year so far is 1-2. The combined record of the opponents they have in their 7 wins against is 21, 42, and 1. So the teams that they've beaten so far are largely teams that you would have expected them to beat. The Bears, the Colts, the Seahawks, the Giants, the Lions, the Texans. They're all teams that you would have expected them to beat. The only sort of statement win they've really had was the Bucs, but then the Bucs lost to the football team, so let's not even get into that just yet. Like, they lose against the Titans. They lose a tough game against the 49ers. Where do they go next week? They go to Lambeau. I do not see the Rams coming out of Lambeau with a win. And funnily enough, since the Rams posted that tweet of them saying we're all in with John Malkovich emptying the chips on the table, they are 0-2. What is it with teams posting things on social media and cursing themselves? Do we need to talk about the OBJ boat picture again? Just stop it. Stop it.
There is going to come a day when teams and players are just banned from social media, isn't there? It's going to be more trouble than it's worth. Let's touch on the other team in that division then, Feathers, just to finish off the initial conversations. And the Cardinals 10, the Panthers 34. I mean, again, 34 to the Panthers. I mean, no one probably saw again this result coming. Let's obviously put it in context. It's not the Cardinals in terms of Kyler Murray and DeAndre Hopkins, but even so, they sort of handily took care of business the week before. Obviously, Carolina, so much focus and attention is going to go to the return of Cam Newton. I don't want to be another podcast that does that because, quite frankly, it was probably always set up to work that way. But we'll wait and see. I think there's rumours that he's going to get most of the practice reps this week. So if he starts next week and he wins, fair enough. But he was obviously used in a gadget sort of way this week, and obviously did what he's good at doing. But obviously it was PJ Walker that took the majority of the snaps. For the Cardinals, is this just a case, fellas, of just forget about this one and move on as quickly as they can to the next and get the star power back? Josh?
Absolutely. This game was dead by the first quarter. This game was dead by the first drive, pretty much. They just couldn't get anything going. But when you actually break it down, I love it when you look at the drives because it does tell you the story. First quarter, fumble, then Carolina touchdown. Turnover on downs for Carolina after only getting 3 yards. Then a touchdown for Carolina. Interception, field goal, punt, field goal. That takes you into the start of the second quarter. They couldn't do anything. They kept giving Carolina short yardage situations. If you go into, Carolina's offense is no great shakes. They almost didn't score on the first couple that they were down on. But because of the fact that they gave them so little to have to attain, they got it done and they looked incredibly competent. But, it could have been so different if they just got out of their own half. Just retain the ball and play a bit of territory. But fair play to the Carolina Panthers defense. Once again, they're proving that they're one of the best defenses in the National Football League at the moment, and will probably retain that for the rest of the year. It's going to be a case of whether or not the offense does enough. Realistically, not every team is going to be giving up that. Not every team is going to be starting Colt McCoy. So, it's one of them. They're just going to have to shake it off. Is Murray back next week?
I was just looking at the injuries at the moment.
I'm not sure. It's been
I thought I might have been just a minute too fast on that one, so I will add in a bit of filler. If Kyler Murray is indeed back, then they're not going to have these issues again because he can make something out of nothing. It does go to show, though, that they need him.
Oh, most definitely, most
Yeah.
definitely. Let's focus on the Carolina side of the ball, Steve, if we can. Then we'll just sort of chalk this up to a bad one for Arizona,
Yeah.
unless you want to make any specific points, mate. But just in terms of Carolina, let's assume that it's now Cam Newton's team, because that seems to be the way that it's trended in terms of, like I say, the practice reps go in there with the intention of him potentially starting. I mean, Josh has just said the offense is now great shakes, but to be fair, I thought Christian McCaffrey looked as good as he has done all season. You know, he was averaging over 7 yards a carry on the weekend. They've obviously got the tandem out wide, DJ Moore and Robbie Anderson, and as Murph has lovely pointed out, it's actually difficult to tell Cam Newton and Robbie Anderson apart these days. But yeah, I mean, they've got some weapons there, haven't they? So, with that defense, this isn't necessarily a team that's going to have to score 30 points a week to win games. How far do you reckon the Panthers could potentially go? I know Josh hasn't been convinced all year, but obviously, does Cam give them that spark to actually sort of push them into the next level?
I mean, I think the frustrating thing for Panthers fans and all season has been that they just don't have the answer at quarterback, and actually their team is better than the production they were getting from Sam Darnold. You plug in Cam Newton. Now, I'm not saying that Cam Newton's the savior, and I still think he's still a decent quarterback. I don't think he's necessarily sort of top 15 standard or anything like that, but he's still I think he's an upgrade on Darnold. You plug someone in, and all of a sudden weapons like Robbie Anderson, like DJ Moore, like the 1-2 punch of McCaffrey and Hubbard is excellent because they're both gadget guys. They're both guys that can be, you can pass to them in the backfield, but then you can also hand the ball off and they can run with it. Chuba Hubbard did a great job of filling in for McCaffrey whilst he's had his stints on the IR. So this Panthers team has weapons. They've always had weapons. They just need someone to get the ball to them. So I think that, whisper it quietly, but I think this Panthers team could be in for a pretty decent end to the season. I think that they're 500 now. They're 5-5. They've already won a couple of sort of pretty decent performances. And I think you look at where they could go from here. The next game is against Washington, who are obviously buoyed from that win against the Bucs. And then they've got the Dolphins and the Falcons, like 3 very winnable games for the Panthers. And all of a sudden, if they win 2 of those, you move to 7-6, and you're definitely in the conversation for the playoffs, especially in the NFC as well. So I'd say, yeah, absolutely. This Panthers team have definitely sort of come alive, and it'd be interesting to see how Newton slots back into this offense, and especially if Newton gets them to the playoffs, do they sign him? Do they sign him next season?
Interesting.
Can we just for 1 second just apply the brakes a little bit on the Cam Newton stuff? Just apply the brakes just a little bit. He was used as a gadget RPO player in the game. Let's have a look at last season. He was awful for the Patriots. Just ease into it, talking about winning 2 out of the next 3. Let's see if he actually can perform for a whole game under center first, yeah?
Just remember,
a little applying of the pressure.
This season is all about chaos. That's what the season's all about.
Look, I know that the spirit of Dave Moore runs through us, but still, let's not think that Cam Newton's about to go on a Super Bowl run, yeah?
Well, Josh, if you haven't learned that you can instantly make decisions based on 1 week of action in the NFL season of 2021, then I don't know what you've been watching, my friend. It's
You're talking
like
to the guy that does
clockwork
the
for 1
power
week,
rankings, mate.
Absolutely. Let's speed it up a bit then, fellas. There's quite a few blowouts, so let's go through a few of these. Jets 17, the Bills 45. Cakewalk, wasn't it, for the Bills? Any comments on that from either of you?
Just a case of it being back for Buffalo. It was just good for them to actually get things firing again.
Yeah, they either put up 40 points or 3 points. Apparently, that's the Buffalo way.
Let's hope for their sake they did the latter a bit more often. Another team that put up 40 on the Cowboys. We said the Falcons train was moving, but very slowly. We moved very quickly into reverse this week, 43-3. Back to business for Dallas, and dare I say back to normal for Atlanta, or is that a bit harsh?
No, you're on the money.
Yeah, I think it's a statement comeback win for Dallas and back to where they probably belong at the moment.
Fair enough. Eagles 30, Broncos 13. Maddening again from the Broncos. Couple of good results and then an absolute stinker. Steve, obviously over to you, my friend. 30-13. You must have been happy with this one.
Do you know what? That is the best performance I've seen from Jalen Hurts so far. He was
Mm.
excellent, and this running game is complementing so well. The Eagles are the top rushing team in the last 3 games in the NFL. They've got something like 680 yards over the last 3 games, so they are moving the ball well. And Jalen Hurts looked poised. Devonta Smith had another game. The catch, the touchdown was unreal. So yeah, it's really exciting to see those weapons lining up. But the defense actually played well. I couldn't believe it. And the Darius Slay scoop and score, if you haven't seen it yet, just watch Teddy Bridgewater's attempt to try and tackle him. It is shocking. So,
that's the non-tackle that's been heard around the world over the last couple of days.
I mean, I'm all for like protecting your franchise quarterback. Don't try and tackle a guy and then get yourself injured, but at least make an attempt. Like, come on. So yeah, it really interesting, exciting performance from the Eagles, and they host the Saints next year. The Eagles are 4-0 on the road. They are unbeaten on the road, but yet they haven't won at home yet. They haven't won at home, so there you go.
They're due one then, mate. They are due one. Get that in your pick'ems this week. And let's go through a few more. 23-17, the Colts over the Jags. Ended up being closer than it probably wanted to be. But I suppose, all joking aside, Josh, all that matters at the minute is getting victories. And, by hook or by crook, the Colts managed to pull this one out.
Yeah, realistically, that 17 was garbage time, I think. I think the Jags got one late. Within the last minute or so, that the Jags picked up their second TD. The Colts were in control pretty much throughout. They weren't necessarily bothered throughout the game. They just seemed in control, saw it through to the finish. The Colts picking up another win, and that's all they have to do. Like you say, all they have to do is just keep on picking up the dubs, and they'll be in and around the conversation. I reckon it's something they can keep on doing. I've been relatively high on the Colts, as you guys know, and everybody else at Full 10 Yards definitely knows. It's just a case of just keep the train going by any means necessary.
Yeah, I think it was a bit closer than you think, mate. It started 17-0 to the Colts, and it ended up at 20-17 before the Colts tagged on a late field goal. So it was a little bit closer than you give the Jags credit for. But not to be dismissed. Like I say, a win is a win, certainly this year in that conference. Let's go through a couple of others. Where are we going to go? Let's go. I'll tell you what, fellas. Let's go for quite possibly the worst game of the weekend for all of the right reasons. The Steelers 16, the Lions 16. I had the pleasure of watching about the last 20 minutes of this because obviously it went to overtime. And when I say pleasure, I don't think I've ever seen a worse game of football. 2 teams that just did not want to win in overtime, littered with mistakes, littered with turnovers. I think we turned it over at the end of the Browns drubbing, which we'll come to in a moment. But I think, Josh, didn't you say that Jared Goff was like 5 of 20 for about 60 yards or something ridiculous? The Steelers obviously started Mason Rudolph. I mean, it's a horrible result because now we've got to keep talking about a tie. It will probably, in all likelihood, knowing the Steelers, get them in the bloody postseason because that's how fortunate they'll be. But fellas, I mean, honestly, this was just an ugly, ugly game of football, wasn't it? Who wants to come in first?
I mean, first of all, ties shouldn't be allowed. They shouldn't. Like, I mean, we've talked about ways to settle games before, like kicking contests. Maybe we should be a bit more, if you're so bad that you tie a game, maybe like the 2 centers have to line up at the one goal line and run to the other goal line. It's like a 100-yard dash and see if one of them can make it before they have to get oxygen. Something. A tie shouldn't be allowed. It's ridiculous.
Asphyxiating an offensive lineman. Yeah, sure, why not?
Well, that's what it should be. If you're that bad that you tie a game, and like you said, Sean, they both had so many chances to win it, and they just couldn't. And
can we talk about Detroit's kick? Can we talk about that kick in overtime? Now, we have seen players having to step in for kickers before, right, and make kicks. I have seen an offensive lineman make a kick in practice better than whatever that attempt was. You saw from the run-up was not a kicker run-up. And he's just kind of at it and just like hitting. It's like when you're playing soccer as a kid and you constantly shoot with your toes. and just hope it goes in the general direction that you're hoping it to go in. Yeah, so I think before I was rudely interrupted by my internet connection, Sean, you were asking me as to whether or not Jared Goff was like 6 for 20 off 60 yards. Yeah, it was terrible. Both quarterbacks couldn't get anything going at all. They were both depending on their run games, and even they were poor. Yeah, we talk about the fact that ties should be banned. No, ties are meant for this kind of game. No one deserved to win. They both deserve to lose. Maybe we give them both losses.
That sounds
Maybe
good
that's
to me.
it.
I'll take that.
Maybe they both lose. Maybe that's a compromise. I'd be willing to accept that. No one gets a win.
Yeah.
You both lose this week.
Yeah.
I don't
Yeah,
think
but
I've
you
ever
couldn't
seen
even
an
give the win to the public either. The public
No.
doesn't win either.
No one wins.
I don't think I've ever seen an overtime game with 7 possessions. 7 possessions in overtime.
Mad, isn't it?
7. That's
Oh.
so
I mean,
funny.
this is the Lions' stats from the weekend. So the Lions had 15 drives and they went punt, 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 touchdown, field goal, touchdown, punt, 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 missed field goal, punt, end of game. Oh my God! What an absolute monstrosity. Yeah. Look, we've talked far too much about this game. 16 apiece.
We
Awful
haven't talked about it
game.
enough.
Well, we could talk all night about it for the wrong reasons. Only thing for me, just as a very quick question, fellas, I'm not going to spend long on it. Steelers did the right thing starting Mason Rudolph, or should they have just seen what they had in Dwayne Haskins? Because I think everyone's agreed that Mason Rudolph definitely isn't the answer. I don't think Dwayne Haskins is either, but obviously he's had a change of environment. Seemed like an opportunity to at least see what they've got. I know a number of Steelers fans that were upset with it. Josh, your views on it, because we've seen Rudolph a few times.
I'm going to just assume that the Steelers know what they've got in training. If Haskins can't beat Rudolph out in training, he doesn't deserve to step on an NFL field. Simple as.
I mean, and Rudolph threw the ball 50 times. He was 30 of 50. So if Haskins can't get in for even just a series, obviously the writing's on the wall, isn't it?
Yeah, it is, and it has been for years.
Yeah, not good. Wasn't a good week at all for the teams in the AFC North. Started off Thursday night football. The Dolphins 22, the Ravens 10. I think the Dolphins just basically blitzed everybody on every play, didn't they? And it worked wonderfully well. Ravens limited to 10 points. Eliminated the run game, got the victory. All joking aside, all of a sudden, the Dolphins are only a couple of games back from the playoff picture, which is ridiculous to
Now,
even
come
suggest
on.
it.
Now, come on. We can't surely be talking about Dolphins in the playoff picture. Oh,
Stranger
no.
things have happened, my friend. Stranger things have happened.
Here's my question to you both. Are the Ravens found out on offense? Because honestly, I looked at that game and I saw the same thing that I've seen in the last 3 or 4 close games with the Ravens, where you take away the run game and you apply pressure to Lamar in the pocket, and bad things happen every time. Miami were just able to see the job through.
I mean, what I would say is I think one of the big reasons that this game ended at 22-10 was it Marquise Brown's fumble, the catch that he didn't catch that then was returned for a touchdown like that, and you can't really blame that on Lamar. That's not Lamar's
No, of course
fault.
you can't.
But yeah, I mean, the Miami found the answer in their defense, like you said, Sean. They just blitzed, and they just gave Baltimore absolutely no time on the ball, and it worked. And Baltimore just didn't really have an answer. And this is you don't see this very often. I mean, there's a reason they're 6-3. You don't see this very often from a Baltimore team that can't figure out. I mean, they've just released Le'Veon Bell tonight, so obviously they've decided that that's not helping their run game. But, Lamar's stat line wasn't dreadful. 26 of 43, 238 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 interception. It wasn't awful by any stretch. But, yeah, I think you've got a point. I think that they aren't the best offense in the league. Certainly not. But I think, was this perhaps just a bad day at the office against a defensive scheme that just really worked? Sometimes you get games where teams' defenses just have an absolute stormer. And I think this was perhaps that. But, we'll see. If this continues to happen, then we'll see. The Ravens, you shouldn't be winning many more games this season. But Miami played the Jets next week, so if they can't win that game, then they certainly ain't going to the playoffs.
Nah, that's got free tie written all over it.
I think just to answer your question, Josh, I think there's a blueprint to beat the Ravens. However, not every defense has got the players to run that scheme.
That's fair.
We'll wait and see how many others they come up against that could potentially shut them down. And I said it was a bad week for the AFC North. We'll finish off this little section, fellas, with the Browns absolutely walloped by the Patriots. Evening to Kieran, who's just texted us to say he's tuned in specifically to watch me and Josh talk about this game. Kieran, obviously our resident Patriots fan who wakes you up every Monday morning with the first view of the NFL Sunday. Look, it was an absolute beating. We could talk about it forever. We're not going to, because quite frankly, I don't want to depress myself too much. But outside of the opening 6 minutes where the Browns looked very good, they ran the ball very well. It was then 54 minutes of being completely outplayed, outcoached, outthought, outfought, and quite frankly, absolutely battered and deservedly so. Anything to add, Josh?
Well, you've kind of taken the 10-minute vitriol that I produced on Sunday night and then refined this morning and took it into a 10-second prose. No, I talk almost every week about how much I think that Bill Belichick changes games, and he definitely did so here. He knew that we didn't have much of a running game, and Kevin Stefanski made damn sure that we didn't after he decided not to run pretty much at all for the rest of the first half. As soon as you do that, what does Bill Belichick do? He adjusts. He makes sure that everyone is at least single covered, if not double covered, with a man zone, of which I really like when you don't have a running attack, put them in man zone, and then rush 4 constantly at Baker, maybe 5 every now and then, and it worked. I've looked at the film. I've looked at the all 22, and I'm sorry, but I don't see many open receivers whatsoever at all. Brown's Twitter's blowing up about Baker at the moment. No, Patriots defense was just awesome. Absolutely awesome. I can barely find windows, let alone open receivers. And for me, it was just the fact that we did not trust D'Ernest Johnson. When he got the ball in the second half, he did show that he could do it, but then you argue, is it garbage time? But no, hats off to the Patriots on both sides of the ball. Matt Jones was fantastic. He just made everything happen on his side of the ball. Our defense wasn't exactly great. I think 3 or 4 guys on each play could be said to have just been walking rather than running, but you play what you've got in front of you, and I actually think that the Patriots are a top 10 team now.
Yeah, and Steve, let's throw it over to you. Like I said, we could badmouth the Browns all day. I think that there's more credit deserved here for the Patriots in this performance. I said last week I had them, I think, ranked as like the 5th team in when we did our playoff predictions. I think Buffalo will probably take care of that division, but this was an impressive performance. Mac Jones was fantastic. Some really, really good throws. Ramondre Stevenson, who passed the COVID concussion protocol, I believe, on the Friday, ran like an absolute monster. He sought out contact. He ran through people. Jacoby Myers obviously eventually getting in the end zone after, 151 receptions or whatever it was. Obviously a good moment for him on a pretty scary injury play, but obviously a good moment for him. But Hunter Henry, they paid big money for 2 tight ends in the summer. Hunter Henry certainly seems to be repaying it, doesn't he? This is a pretty good New England Patriots team that is certainly getting better as the year goes on, wouldn't you say?
I think it's taken a little while for some of these players to gel, but I think you now have to acknowledge a few things. First of all, this Patriots team is very good. They are no longer a W on the column of the schedule when you go to visit them. They are an accomplished team. 2, I think it's time to accept that Mac Jones is the best rookie quarterback from last year's class, because he is playing exceptional football right now. He was the highest rated passer rating of all the quarterbacks who started week 10. He had the highest passer rating. That's astonishing. He's playing such good football, and it just shows how much it benefits a rookie to step into a scheme where there's a head coach that's been in play for so many years and has done this so many times and knows how to institute things. And it's taken a little bit of time, but players like you say, Hunter Henry starting to repair things, Mac Jones obviously starting to repair. But I would also give big props to Judon on the defense. He is lighting up the defense at the moment, and he is eating up offenses. And that hit on Baker Mayfield, oh boy, he's a real talent. And I know they spent a lot of money in free agency, and that's very un-Patriots-like of them. And I think we were all critical of it. That when you spend a lot of money, it doesn't always work. But some of these players are really repaying that. And I think this Patriots team, I think that I'd probably have them in the AFC playoff picture somewhere. I don't know where. I don't think they'll win the division because, like you said, I think the Bills will do that. But I think they'll definitely be 5th or 6th. And I think they could certainly go far. I would just sit quickly on the Cleveland side of things. I said off air that last week felt like a sort of a season starts here moment, and a sort of chance to move from there. You were plus 500 and a chance to sort of make a claim to win that division, and then all of a sudden everything comes crashing down. Questions are being asked left, right, and center of the roster. Is the defense good enough? Is the defensive coordinator good enough? Is Baker good enough? Like, there's just so many questions, and I think. We said earlier that realistically for this Cleveland team to make the playoffs, they have to win 5 more games. And if you look at their schedule coming up, I just don't know where those next 5 wins come from. I just don't. I think you'd need to beat the Ravens twice. And right now with this defense, the way it's playing, I just don't see that happening. So tough times out in Cleveland. It's strange to see them go from the worst to first almost, and then all of a sudden have this like middling season where they're not really anything. It's sort of strange. I sort of expected Cleveland to be there in the conversation at the end, but it just adds to the chaos that is this NFL season.
Browns fans can't have nice things, my friend. We can't have nice things.
No, we can't.
A few more games to wrap up, fellas. The Vikings 27, the Chargers 20. Big win for the Vikings. They sort of still fishing around in that sort of playoff hunt. Disappointing one from the Chargers perspective. Seems to have gone really quite quiet from a Chargers perspective. Josh, obviously both of these teams, like I say, still very much sort of fighting in the playoff areas. Like I say, though, it's been a bit of a dip the last few weeks for the Chargers, hasn't it?
It has. And to be honest with you, I can't really put my finger as to what's the main issue. Because whenever I tune over, the offense seems to be able to move the ball. They just can't put the points on the same way that they were at the start of the season. Then again, at the first few weeks, I did say that at some point these 4th downs aren't going to work out, or they're going to have to change their approach. They're not going to be able to get 40 points a week. It's just not sustainable. Turns out it's not sustainable. Big props to the Vikings, though, because they've been in so many of these close games with good teams, and it's good to see them actually turn one into a dub. I do feel like they deserve it. They are probably the best 4-5 team going. I think they're 4-5. They are definitely a really good 4-5. It is now a coin flip. But then again, though, like I said to you chaps at the start of today's show, anywhere between 8th and like 20th, anyone can beat anyone at the moment. It's one of those where I'm not surprised by the result, and the Chargers actually did all right. They just got beat.
I think this is showing that this year's just a season too early for the Chargers. I think we're finding out that offense perhaps isn't quite as good as we all thought it was, and I think they're missing a couple of pieces. They need to get better in the red zone, like you said, Josh. They need to start putting points. They need to start finishing drives and putting points on the board, and just killing teams off. And you can't, if you want to be making the playoffs, you can't be losing against teams like the Vikings. With all respect to the Vikings, they go into this game 3-5. The Chargers can't really be losing that game. But what I will say is, on your point about the Vikings being the best 4-5 team, the 8th and 9th seed in the NFC at the moment is currently the Vikings and the 49ers. Which one has the best chance of making the playoffs?
I'd need to see their schedules. But if you're asking me who's better, the Vikings or the 49ers, in my power rankings, I've got the Vikings 17th and the 49ers 18th. So...
Well, they play each other in a couple of weeks' time, so big game there.
What a ding-dong. What a ding-dong that will be. Brilliant.
Yeah.
I would guess without looking that the Vikings schedule will be easier because of obviously the division that they're in. Obviously, the 49ers are still going to have some tough games to play in the West. So I would guess from that perspective. I think I had the Vikings in last week, didn't I? So, based on the fact that they've won this week, I'm not going to change my mind on that.
They do still have to play the Packers twice, though, the Vikings.
Yeah, Packers will be in by then. So.
And the 49ers have a guaranteed win against the Rams as well, still to have.
That is true. That is true.
Bounce back game for Justin Jefferson as well, 9 for 143 after going a combined 5 for 90 over the last 2 weeks. So good to see him back to some of his rookie form. What games have we got left, fellas? Let's go. Washington 29, the Bucks 19. Mentioned it earlier. Got to go down as one of the biggest surprises of the week. One of the biggest surprises to me was just watching the coverage, and when they said this is a rematch of the playoffs from last year, and you think, God almighty, I forgot completely all about that. But yeah, it was a playoff rematch, but Washington come out on the right side of it this time, 29-19. Steve, you sort of jokingly said last week nothing would surprise me. Surely this surprised you a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, you saw the football team go up. I think at one point they were 16-6 up, and you sort of thought, "Oh, it's all right. The Bucks will bring this back. This is the Bucks. It's Tom Brady. You put the ball in his hands with 2 minutes left to go, and there's no one else in the history of the NFL that you'd rather have throwing the ball down the field." And they just didn't. They just couldn't get it done, and especially impressive as well, considering that Washington lost Chase Young, which is really sad, by the way, that he's torn his ACL, so he's going to be out for some time, probably to sort of might make the start of next season. But he's such a talent; it's a real shame to see guys like that go down. And I think Montez Sweat might have left the game as well. So like real impressive to see that the defense could get it done without those two guys. They're two sort of main pass rushers. But this Washington defense that we all sort of have been saying for so long, like it's not the defense that we all thought it was. Maybe this week it was, and they finally pull out a win. So I think what I will certainly say on the broader topic of Washington, the NFC East is definitely not as bad as it's been in recent years. You know, every team outside of Dallas has won at least 3 games, which you would not have been saying over the last couple of years. So I'd say the NFC East is definitely making improvements. You know, fleetingly, you might say, but yeah, impressive win for Washington. I still don't think they do much from here. I think this might have just been a flash in the pan. But what was rare is this is a loss for Bruce Arians off a bye, which I don't know if he's ever done, or he's got an incredible record week after a bye, and he usually makes a point of winning after the bye because you got that fresh legs and fresh motivation. But he lost, so yeah, big surprise in Tampa.
Yeah, Josh, I'm going to bring you in a minute, but just on Steve's point about you put the ball in Brady's hands and he's going to complete the comeback. This is the 4th quarter. So it starts off with a Tampa Bay punt, and then it ends up with Washington fumbling the ball away after 4 plays. Brady then in 3 plays finds Mike Evans for 40 yards. 10 minutes 55 left in the game after that. The next Washington drive takes 10 minutes and 26 seconds off the clock. I mean, it's the longest drive recorded this season. It was 19 plays in duration. They converted a 3rd and 2 with a 3-yard Heineke scramble. They then converted a 3rd and 1 with an Antonio Gibson 2-yard run. They completed a 3rd and 4 with a Heineke pass to Adam Humphries. They completed a 3rd and 5 with a Heineke pass for 6 yards to Taylor Heineke. And when they got all the way down to the goal line, they converted a 4th and 1 with an Antonio Gibson touchdown, and then an absolutely brilliant coaching decision to kneel on the 2-point conversion, just to take any drama out of the equation. Tom Brady never actually got the ball in the 4th quarter outside of a 40-yard pass to Mike Evans. I mean, look, you're not going to do that every week, but what a drive to ice a game.
It really was, and it's the perfect drive. You know, we hear of great drives down the field that drain clock. That's a clock drainer. You know, that's the goal. 10 minutes. Take it to 3rd down and short every damn time and convert. And then keep hammering it with 2-yard and 3-yard gains just to drain as many 40 seconds off the clock as you can, and then convert it at the end. That's the main point. I tuned in at the start of that drive because I'd just gotten very annoyed at Cleveland by that point, so I could. And you know, you're watching it and you're thinking, any second now, Tom Brady's going to get the ball here and he's going to start this comeback. And then as they got past the halfway mark, it was very much a case of they're actually going to do this. They're going to get down and they're going to actually have iced this game. But to a broader point, Washington knew the assignment today. It was score early and often. They scored off their first 4 drives, which is the first time that they've done that since 2016. Was the first time that they did that. They pressured Brady into making quick decisions and bad passes, of which caused the early interceptions, and they just converted the points off that. That's what you have to do against a team like Tampa, a team like Kansas, a team like Baltimore. You have to put points on the board quickly and run up the scoreboard. Washington didn't run up the scoreboard as much as other teams would have, but they got the job done, and that last drive was worth 2 touchdowns.
Yeah, absolute gold dust, really was. Impressive win. And obviously back to the drawing board for the Bucks. Team that is showing the most consistency at the moment, the Tennessee Titans, continue their winning streak, 23-21 over the Saints. Good matchup, tight matchup. The Saints playing plenty of teams close, but again, just failing to get over the hump on this one. We question whether the Titans had survived the Derrick Henry loss. That's 2 wins in a row, Steve. Certainly looking like the team to beat in the AFC.
Yeah, they've won 6 in a row, I think, since, and I think 5 of those have been without him. So, or certainly quite a few. They just look like the team to beat, and it's strange how they started the season. I think they went 2-2 to start the season, and I think we were all sort of saying, "Oh, they've lost a lot of pieces on defense." I think they lost their starting 2 corners, and you start to think, well, is this just a return to sort of normality and mediocrity of the Titans? But no, they've turned it around. I think massive props to Mike Vrabel. He's doing a terrific job in Tennessee. Ryan Tannehill looks an absolute transformation from the quarterback they picked up from Miami, and what a deal that's been. And yeah, this team is just making things work, and no one really stood out too much in this win. They just played good football, and I think that is the story of. And you look across the league to the NFC and see how the Green Bay are winning games. The Titans are doing the same thing. I think this season is not about big flashy wins. It's not about putting 45 points up and blowing out teams, because those teams that are doing that have proven that they also have games where they just can't score. What these teams, the Titans and specifically the Packers, are doing is just winning games, effectively and efficiently. Not blowout performances, but at the end of the day, like I've said for several weeks, a win's a win. If it's a notch in the win column, it doesn't matter how you do it, as long as you get it, it's a win. And this Titans team at 8-2, I think they look head and shoulders above anyone else in the AFC at the moment. I don't think anyone else is going to catch them. Saints team put up a bit of a fight, but I think this was always going to be a Titans win. The Saints, they threatened towards the end, but they just couldn't quite get it done. And this Titans team, you look at their schedule, they've got the Texans next week. They should win that game. Tough game at Gillette. I think that's going to be a real interesting game, especially the way the Patriots are playing right now. But then they've got Jaguars, Steelers, Niners, Dolphins, Texans. You'd think that this Titans team should win every single one of those games. So I think there's definitely a path for this Titans team to finish 14-3, if not 15-2, which would be a hell of a form to take into the playoffs. If they can, obviously by the game at the Texans, they might be resting players and lose that game. But if they can take a winning streak of 10 plus games into the playoffs, we've all seen how momentum can shift. This Titans team are an absolute juggernaut right now.
I'm just going to go bat for Dave Moore for a second. I think that the Saints were more than in this. I thought they were the better team throughout the game. And realistically, if it weren't for the botching of an extra point, they would have probably had been favoured to have actually gone on and won this game. If you just look at the stats alone, New Orleans were head and shoulders above in total yards, passing yards, rushing yards, average yards of play. The only turnover was a fumble lost, and yet they were still only 2 extra points away from tying up the game. Trevor Siemian, I thought, had an excellent game, considering 19 from 34 for 298 yards and 2 touchdowns. They didn't really have much of a running game, but yet still, matched up to the Titans. This Saints team is a beaten down team when you actually look at it on paper. And they are really, squaring up against top teams right now. But I don't know if this is a case of the Titans were lucky to get out with a win, or whether the Saints put up the fight. It's one or the other, potentially both. But I don't think that as a Titans fan, you would have come away, beaming on Sunday night. I think you'd been there going, "Oh God, thank God for that."
Yeah, and look, I think the Titans will be quite happy if they can get through the next few weeks until Derrick Henry comes back. As Steve said, a win's a win. You know, they'll take it. We said this was probably the toughest game left on the schedule. They've got through it. It's another one ticked off. I think the Saints lost it by going for the 20-yard field goal on 4th and 1 from the 1-yard line. I know me and Josh have very different opinions on 4th down, but I don't understand why you would kick a field goal then knowing that you're going to have to get a 2-pointer from the 2-yard line on a further possession when you're on the 1-yard line, and that potentially is worth 4 more points as opposed to 1 bonus point in that equation. For me, it was a very Sean Payton-like move. You know, if they hadn't have got it, then Tennessee is starting on the 1-yard line, and you would back your defense to then get you the ball back in good position. So, yeah, for me, they should have been more aggressive there. You know, that could have obviously changed things dramatically. Obviously, doesn't help when you then full start on the 2-point attempt and it gets pushed back to the 7-yard line. But again, you have to sometimes factor these things in. Final game of the week, fellas, as we're approaching the hour mark on the review pod. The Kansas City Chiefs, have they finally arrived? 41-14 over the Raiders. I'll confess, boys, I have watched hardly none of it. I've read all the superlatives, though. It sounds very much like Patrick Mahomes' best game of the year. I know he's got Sean's offensive game ball of the week on the full10yards.com. Go and check out Sean's excellent article. You know, but you can see from his stat line, 5 touchdowns, 406 yards. Feels very much more like a Chiefs performance, Josh.
To be honest with you, you could just stop it there. Mahomes, 406 yards, 5 touchdowns. That was the game, really. Raiders had no chance. This was a revenge game. This was I'm actually still a good quarterback game. They were never in it. Kansas just had fun. Mahomes had fun. There's no rushing to tell of, really. You know, it was kind of passed around a few. It was the Mahomes and Kelsey show. Kelsey, 119 yards after 8 receptions. This is the Chiefs team. This is what they do week in, week out. Just whether or not they can keep it going. And if they play like they did on Sunday night, yeah, why not?
You just said there, mate, there was no rushing to talk about. Steve, let's talk about the other side of the ball. We've said this Kansas defense has been much maligned. It's took a lot of the blame for some of the issues that I think, to be fair, have been more on the offensive side of the ball, certainly in recent weeks. But the defense has had its fair share of criticism. From the Raiders' perspective, leading rusher was Derek Carr with 18 yards. Josh Jacobs, what has happened to Josh Jacobs? He was a player that people thought was going to take the league by storm this time 18 months ago. And he's been absolutely pedestrian. 7 attempts for 16 yards. Kenyon Drake, 4 for 16. Nothing at all going on the ground for the Raiders. And Derek Carr, a reasonable stat line, but like you say, just always playing from behind.
This is why you don't take running backs in the first round, because you can pick them up in the 5th round and they can have just as much impact. Do I need to bang my drums together anymore? Yeah, I mean, look, Josh summed up quite well. This Raiders team never really got going. This was a statement performance from the 2019 sort of Chiefs season that you would expect from that sort of team, and they just looked so effective. This Vegas defense couldn't stop anything, and when the Chiefs are playing like they were, you don't expect them to. You know, they were so dominant. You know, if the Chiefs play like that every week, that's why people pick them to win the Super Bowl, because they were just excellent. And I think when perhaps we're guilty of, certainly me, guilty of being a bit hyperbolic about the Chiefs over the last few weeks, and maybe it was just a case of Mahomes having a few off weeks, and you know he's allowed to when his ceiling's that high. But this was a statement win, and all of a sudden we were talking about you know, the playoff picture and how crazy it all is. The Chiefs recently were as low as, what was it, like 11th, I think they were. They're now 4th in the AFC rankings, and leading that division. So all of a sudden, the Chiefs are back in the conversation, and they're 6-4. You know, there's sub 500 days along behind them, and you'd imagine that they'd probably go on to at least be 11 or 12 wins. So yeah, what were we all worried about?
I know. I can't believe some idiot on this podcast didn't even have him in the playoffs last week. We'll have to get rid of him. We'll have to get rid of him from the panel. I've mentioned it briefly. Sean's Game Ball article up as always. Full10yards.com. Check out the excellent work that Sean puts in and week out. Particularly liked his call for play of the week. The play that never was. We never mentioned it, fellas, because obviously it was a long time ago now. But yeah, Robert Hunt. What an absolute legend of a man you are. full-length dive from an offensive lineman. Very amusing if you haven't checked it out. Go and read the article, read all about it, and certainly get a view of that clip on Twitter or Game Pass or wherever you can get one from. We will be back later on in the week to discuss all things week 11. We've discussed week 10.
Week 11.
We'll try and figure out week 11. I'll give you a spoiler now. We won't get any of it right, but we'll do our best. We'll have a look at what's coming up and we'll get you set for the week. Check out Josh's Power Rankings tomorrow. Until later on in the week, thanks ever so much for listening, as always, to the Full 10 Yards podcast. Tell your friends that they're missing out if they're not listening, and we will catch you all again later on in the week.
Thanks for listening to the podcast. Don't forget to find us on all our social channels, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok and YouTube. Head over to our website, full10yards.com, where you can find out more information about why we are #4TheGame.